Hey Sculpture 2 students, I'm going to be showing you our next project here that we're going to be making for our at-home time. And this is the famous building cardboard project. What you're going to be doing is choosing a building that's famous, or famous just to you, that you like a lot, and you're going to be using that as your idea for what you're going to make. Then, out of cardboard, you're going to be making a small maquette, a smaller version of that building. And we'll be talking about kind of what a maquette is here on the next slide. So let's get right to that. So what is a maquette? Before artists sometimes make the real thing, it's a nice idea for them to work through what it's going to look like in its 3D form by making a small version of it. On my next slide here, I'll show you a few examples of what a maquette might look like. And it's a great idea, at least for, if you were thinking about become an artist or you're working through some of those things, you want to make a proposal to somebody saying, hey, this is what the project will look like that I'm going to make. Sometimes having a maquette is a good idea because then they can see visually what it's going to be like. Before a company would choose, like, all right, who are we going to pay a large sum of money to make a massive bronze sculpture that we're going to put up in our building, they'd want to see like an idea first of what it's going to look like. Okay? Because it's a pretty big investment to make large art. Right? So same kind of thing that architects do before they get approval to make a building. So here's some example maquettes for some snow sculptures that were being made out at, this is the state fairgrounds, several years ago. But you'll see a small house here. It's kind of representing, I think, a gingerbread house. And they are making the same exact version, but much larger out of snow. Same over here, we've got some bears. Looks like a polar bear and somebody riding on a polar bear. And here's the last one. This one's a large fish or whale coming out of some water, but they were making it out of snow. So each of the artists that were selected to work in this snowmaking sculpture competition had to make a maquette first, and then they used that maquette to create their actual piece. So you're kind of doing that same kind of thing, but in reverse. You're going to take something that really does exist and make a much smaller version, but to scale. So I would like to show you a few student examples just to kind of get your creativity flowing as to what you might want to do. So I'm going to start by showing you this one here. So this one is based off of the Parthenon building out in Greece. And this one, it's kind of semi-destructed because the current version of that building is like falling apart. So they made all these pillars that went all the way around the project. I think I just have the single view here, but all these pillars kind of went all around the project, and then they even had like cut up cardboard that looked like it was just little chunks that had fallen off. All right, we've got Big Ben here from London. We had a couple Empire State Buildings actually, so here's just, you can even just imagine, okay, that's a little bit of trim. This is about probably 2.5 feet tall. You are working, on a much smaller scale than a real building, but also, a little bit larger than what you might be used to making sculpture-wise. So, depending on what you decide to make, you're going to be kind of making a more complex building or a less complex building. I think that these bottom two examples are my favorite from what was turned in. This one was Dome of the Rock out in Jerusalem, but even the other views of this just were really great. They'd been paying close attention to adding in some details to help us understand what it looks like. Right? And that Parthenon building is just great too. So again, the first step is going to be you choosing the building that you're going to use. Okay, so choose a piece of architecture that you find interesting. Okay, you're going to make a scaled model of that architecture. Right? In essence, you are going to be making a maquette of the larger finished building. Right? You can choose any architecture to use for the project, but consider the following as you decide. How will the details look when it's made out of cardboard? Right? Cardboard is a material that is limiting, but also can be made in a lot of different ways. Right? It's great at flat things. You can add some texture if you kind of like peel up the paper a little bit, but texture can be a little bit harder to do. Right? Also, kind of avoid, things that are just real basic. Don't just make a rectangle building. Maybe find a more interesting building that has some more shape to it. Right? That can sometimes be a little bit more fun to work with too with this project. So here's an example of an artist Estudio. It's a YouTuber that really does a lot of great architecture maquettes. And I've got a couple links to some videos in here that you can watch and kind of see the whole process of what they do to make it. But what you'll even notice here in this picture, there's different types of cardboard that they've collected to use. So some are the corrugated cardboard that has multiple layers, and other parts are kind of a thinner material. I think they even use like just mat board sometimes, like thinner, pieces of cardboard. But it might be a good idea to start collecting some cardboard, finishing a cereal box, use that, as you're, going about the project. Just kind of keep those cardboard pieces all together. Okay, so after you pick your building, you're going to be calculating a ratio as to how large you're going to be making the project. So I've got a requirement for you. You need to make yours at least 12 inches or larger, right? So I've got two different ways that you can kind of think about calculating a ratio. Right? First, look up the real height, okay? And you can look up the real width of the building, if you can find it online. If not, do your best educated guess, okay? So I rounded the real height down to 1,000, okay? And I also rounded this down to 300. So basically 1,000 feet tall and 300 feet and on one of its side at the base, okay? So based on that, I'm going to use a ratio. So I first thought, okay, what if I make 1 foot in real life of the project become 1 foot, or sorry, 100 feet of the building? Well, then I'd be making something that's 10 feet tall. I'm not going to make a 10-foot tall cardboard sculpture, okay? What about 1 inch equals 100 feet? Okay, well, I'd only be making something that's about 10 inches tall, okay? It's a more manageable size. What I ended up deciding on doing, though, is 1 inch to 50 feet. That would make it about 20 inches tall. Not quite 2 feet, but then at least I've got some space that I can work with for the details that I want to put into the project. Okay? So then you'll want to work on completing your planning. So here are just a couple examples of cardboard sculptures that I had found online that I thought turned out really cool too. So prior to finishing, getting started, I would like you to get your planning done and then show that to me. Turn it in so that way I can give you some feedback and understand that you've got a good kind of start to things. So here's what the planning looks like that you're going to find on your Schoology. If I scroll down here, you'll see there's some sections that have boxes that are opened up. Right? You'll want to answer anything that has a box, okay? Because that's going to be part of the planning for your project. So I'm going to walk you through an example here of one that I've finished, just so you can see how to do it. So down here, I've decided to do the split rock lighthouse. So this is an example one that I had partially made last trimester for this class. Where's it located? Well, this one's north of Two Harbors, Minnesota. Okay, it's a famous building if you're Minnesotan, but maybe you wouldn't really realize what it is unless you were from Minnesota. That's what I'm saying. If it's a building that you really want to make, you can make it. So I looked up the real scale. So 54 feet height, length 50 feet, depth 30 feet. Okay, so just kind of the 3 dimensions of like how large the project is. So then what I decided to do is I know that I want to at least make it, hit the requirement of 12 inches, right? At least 1 foot. So I ended up calculating out 1 inch equals 4.5 feet. So 1 inch of my sculpture is 4.5 feet of the real building. And how I got to that is I took 12, which was going to be the longest part of the project. So the height, I just took 12, and I thought about, okay, the height is really 54 feet. I just took 54 divided by 12, and that's how I got 4.5 feet. So that's another way to do it, okay, to figure out the math. So you might, if you're just going for 12 inches, take the largest dimension, okay, and divide it by 12, and that'll give you your scale. Okay. So then after that, you've got to sketch out what you want your project to look like. Okay, so what part of the building are you going to focus in on? Are you going to make some of the ground around it? How is it going to look? And then I would like you to add your dimensions in, right, for on your sketch, so that way we can understand like how large things are going to be. So you'll see the connection here between this right here, the measurements, and on my sketch where I was kind of showing those. Right, so I've got that height, width, depth kind of thing going on here. Right, it doesn't need to be a super detailed sketch, but it should show in general what the project is going to look like. So that right there is going to be your first day of this project, is figuring out what you want to make and the scale, do your sketch, and all that. So we'll get into how to make the project in the next video.